Have you ever felt like the weight of the world is pressing down on you, and no matter how hard you try, you just can't find the strength to move forward? Perhaps you are in a season where it seems like God is far away, and your prayers are met with silence. Jeremiah, one of God's most faithful prophets, knew exactly what this was like. In Lamentations 3, we see his raw human struggle, a man overwhelmed by pain and despair. But what sets Jeremiah apart is not his own strength, but the strength that came from God. Every time Jeremiah felt like he couldn't go on, God renewed him, guided him, and clothed him with his spirit. Today, let's reflect on how God's presence in Jeremiah's life can bring comfort and hope to yours. Just as God was with Jeremiah, he is with you. The same God who gave Jeremiah strength when all hope seemed lost is the same God who is with you, ready to pour out new mercies every morning. Jeremiah's struggle and the presence of God. Jeremiah was not immune to suffering. In Lamentations 3 verses 17 to 18, he cries, "I have been deprived of peace. I forgot what prosperity is. Therefore I say, my splendor is gone, and all that I expected from the Lord." His heart was crushed, his spirit broken. But it is important to remember that even in this state of despair, God had not abandoned him. The very fact that Jeremiah could pour out his heart shows the intimate relationship he had with God. When we find ourselves in similar moments, when peace seems distant and hope seems out of reach, it is crucial to remember that God's presence does not leave us. The Holy Spirit was with Jeremiah, strengthening him to continue, even when he felt like he couldn't. Maybe today, you feel like Jeremiah and wonder if you can make it through another day. Remember, it is not by your own strength, but by the power of God's Spirit that you will be sustained. God's guidance in darkness. As Jeremiah faced the devastation of his people's exile, he did not trust his own understanding. Instead, he sought God's guidance. In Lamentations 3 verse 21, we see a turning point. "Yet I remember this, and therefore I have hope." Jeremiah did not let the darkness consume him. He turned his heart and mind to God's faithfulness, trusting that even in the midst of chaos, God was still guiding him. When we are surrounded by uncertainty, we can follow Jeremiah's example. God's guidance may not always be obvious, but he is always guiding us. Sometimes it is in the quiet promptings of the Holy Spirit that we find our way. In your own life, as you face challenges that seem insurmountable, know that God is walking with you, just as he did with Jeremiah. He will never leave you without direction. Strength through the Holy Spirit. Jeremiah's ability to endure was not something that came from within him. It was God who gave him the strength to continue. In Lamentations 3 verses 22 to 23, we find the beautiful statement, "Because of the Lord's great love we are not consumed, for his mercies have no end. They are renewed every morning. Great is your faithfulness." It wasn't Jeremiah's determination that kept him standing. It was God's unfailing love and strength. In our own lives, we often feel like we need to muster strength to face our challenges. But just like Jeremiah, our strength doesn't come from within. It comes from the Holy Spirit. Each morning, God offers us a new mercy, a new portion of his Spirit to sustain us through the day. No matter what you are facing right now, know that God's strength is available to you, just as it was to Jeremiah. You don't have to go through this alone or in your own power. The role of faith in suffering. Jeremiah's suffering did not end overnight. He had to endure many hardships, but what kept him moving forward was his faith. In Lamentations 3 verse 24, he proclaims, "The Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him." Jeremiah understood that, even while waiting, God was working. He placed his faith in God's perfect timing and trusted that the Lord would fulfill his promises. We too are called to have faith in the midst of our suffering. It's easy to get discouraged when we don't see immediate results, but God is faithful. He sees the big picture and is always working behind the scenes, just as he was with Jeremiah. When you feel overwhelmed by the struggles in your life, remember that God is not done with you. His timing is perfect, and he will carry you through this season stronger than before. Finding hope in God's mercies. One of the most powerful lessons we learn from Jeremiah is that God's mercies are new every morning. In Lamentations 3 verses 22 to 23, Jeremiah clings to the hope that each new day brings new mercies from God. No matter how difficult the previous day had been, he knew that God's love and compassion would renew him for the challenges ahead. In your own life, you may be facing a series of trials that seem to have no end. But like Jeremiah, you can find hope in the promise that God's mercies never end. Each morning he offers you a fresh start, a new beginning. Don't carry the weight of yesterday into today. Trust that God has already prepared the strength and grace you need for whatever comes your way. Trusting God in silence. There were times in Jeremiah's life when it seemed like God was silent, and yet he continued to trust. In Lamentations 3 verse 26, he writes, "It is good to wait in silence for the salvation of the Lord." Even when Jeremiah could not see immediate evidence of God's work, he trusted in God's invisible hand. He knew that God's silence was not absence, it was a call to deeper trust. On your own journey, you may be waiting for an answer from God, and it may seem like heaven is silent. But just as God was with Jeremiah, He is with you. Silence is often a time of growth, a time to deepen your trust in God's faithfulness. Know that even in the silence, God is at work, and His salvation is on the way. God's promise of restoration. Finally, Jeremiah holds fast to the promise that God's plan is one of restoration. In Lamentations 3 verses 31 to 32, we read, "For no one is rejected by the Lord forever. Though he brings sorrow, he will show compassion, so great is his unfailing love." Jeremiah knew that God had not abandoned his people, and that, in time, He would restore what had been broken. Whatever situation you find yourself in today, God's promise of restoration still stands. He is the God who heals, restores, and makes all things new. Like Jeremiah, we may go through periods of sadness, but they will not last forever. God's compassion will help us through this, and He will restore what was lost. Trust His unfailing love and believe that He is leading you to a place of healing and renewal. No matter what you are going through today, remember that God's mercies are new every morning. Just as He was with Jeremiah, He is with you, guiding you, strengthening you, and pouring out His love. If this message has brought you comfort, I encourage you to share it with someone who may be in need of hope. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more encouraging words, and let's continue this journey of faith together. Every day is a new opportunity to experience God's love and mercy. Let us walk in that hope.